Love doesn't pay the bills. I need to be practical about my future. Those were the words that came out of my fiancée's mouth as she stared me down without a shred of shame. I remember blinking at her, thinking maybe I'd misheard, maybe she was joking, maybe the woman I had promised to spend the rest of my life with wasn't actually telling me that cheating wasn't betrayal, but strategy. But no, she sat there, arms crossed, engagement ring glinting under the restaurant lights like some cruel joke, and she meant every word. For a second, the world around me went silent. All I could see was her face, calm, calculated, almost smug. I thought back to the nights I'd stayed late at work to save for our wedding, the weekends I'd skipped out on friends just to be with her, the plans I'd built for a future that apparently didn't measure up to her version of practical. It wasn't just that she admitted to stepping outside of our relationship. It was the way she made it sound reasonable, like she was the logical one and I was the fool clinging to something as useless as loyalty. I sat there torn between rage and heartbreak, wondering if I was crazy for still wanting to believe in us, or if I was finally seeing her for who she really was. But I had no idea that this single sentence would unravel everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved. When I first met her, it felt like fate had stepped into my life. We locked eyes at a friend's gathering, and within minutes, we were talking as if we had known each other for years. She had this presence about her, confident, magnetic, the kind of woman who made heads turn without even trying. And when she laughed at my joke, I thought I had hit the jackpot. From the very beginning, though, there were little comments that hinted at what she valued. She'd casually mention how nice it would be to upgrade her lifestyle one day, or how she couldn't wait to travel the world in first class. I chalked it up to ambition. After all, who doesn't dream big? But in hindsight, those words were early red flags waving right in front of me. I worked hard to be the kind of man she could rely on. I picked up extra shifts so I could treat her to nice dinners. I saved up for gifts that I knew would make her smile, even if it meant I had to sacrifice my own wants. She'd say thank you, but there was always a shadow in her tone, as if it wasn't quite enough. When I showed up with flowers, she'd glance at them and mutter, "Roses again?" When I drove her home in my old car, she'd laugh and say, "One day you'll get me out of this thing, right?" Stung, but I brushed it off. I told myself that she was joking, that deep down she appreciated the effort. I believed in us so fiercely that I ignored the cracks forming beneath the surface. Love, I thought, would be enough to patch over everything. But those cracks weren't just cracks. They were warnings. And as much as I wanted to believe in the fairy tale, I was about to learn the hard way that her idea of practicality had nothing to do with building a life together. I thought those were just little quirks until her idea of practicality turned into something much darker. It didn't happen all at once. It was little things at first, the kind of comments you tell yourself not to overthink. We'd be out with her friends, and she'd laugh at a story I told, only to follow it with a jab. "You wouldn't understand. You're not successful enough." Everyone laughed, but my face burned. I told myself she was teasing, but the truth cut deeper than I wanted to admit. The more time passed, the more her need for status bled into everything. At parties, she gravitated toward men with expensive watches and tailored suits. She'd lean in close, laughing too hard at their joke, brushing her hand against their arm. When I pulled her aside later, asking why she acted that way, she rolled her eyes. "Relax, it's called networking. Not everything is about you." But then came the night I overheard her talking to a friend while she thought I was out of earshot. Her voice was sharp with amusement. "Honestly, I'm just training him to be useful. If he wants to keep me, he needs to learn what real ambition looks like." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding. Training me? Like I was some project she could mold into her ideal? Her phone became another battlefield. Late-night texts she wouldn't explain. The screen tilted away from me whenever I walked by. If I asked who she was talking to, she'd sigh dramatically and call me paranoid. "You're acting insecure again. It's embarrassing." Every doubt I raised, she flipped back on me, as if the problem wasn't her behavior, but my inability to trust. Even my friends began to notice. One of them pulled me aside after a dinner and said quietly, "She's not in it for love, man. She's looking for something else." I wanted to defend her, but their words gnawed at me, echoing late into the night. The worst moment came during a double date. The other guy, a successful entrepreneur, spent the evening talking about his business. She gazed at him like he was the most fascinating man in the world. And then, in front of everyone, she turned to me and said, "Why don't you take notes? Maybe one day you'll aspire to that level." The table went quiet. I laughed weakly, pretending not to be humiliated, but inside, I was crumbling. Soon after, I discovered she'd been meeting a man from her office. She claimed he was mentoring her, giving her business advice. But the way she dressed up for those meetings, the way she'd return home glowing, phone buzzing with his messages, told a different story. I confronted her once, and she snapped, "Not every man who talks to me is trying to sleep with me. Stop being jealous." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But deep down, I knew I was losing her to someone else, or maybe I never truly had her to begin with. And then, one night, I caught her red-handed, and her excuse was the most insulting thing I'd ever heard. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. She told me she had a late meeting with colleagues, some business dinner that I wouldn't enjoy anyway, but something in my gut wouldn't let it go. Call it intuition, call it the whispers of every red flag I had ignored, but I found myself driving across town, following the address she had carelessly left in her messages. It wasn't an office. It wasn't a work event. It was a high-end restaurant, the kind where men in tailored suits sipped wine that cost more than my paycheck. Through the wide glass windows, I saw her, my fiancée, seated at a corner table, leaning in close to a man whose hand rested over hers. They weren't discussing business. They were whispering, laughing, their faces inches apart, the kind of intimacy you don't mistake for anything else. I felt my stomach drop, but my legs carried me forward anyway. I pushed open the door, the warmth and hum of quiet conversation washing over me, and walked straight toward their table. She froze the second she saw me, but she didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed, like I had just ruined her evening. "What is this?" My voice shook, louder than I intended, drawing stares from nearby tables. "Who is he?" The man smirked, but she pulled her hand back slowly, almost theatrically, as if to prove she had nothing to hide. "I told you," she said calmly, her tone slicing through me. "Love doesn't pay the bills. He can give me what you can't." Her words felt like a blade straight through my chest. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run, but I stood there, my heart pounding in my ears. "After everything I've done for you?" I choked out. "Every hour I worked, every sacrifice, every humiliation I let slide because I thought we were building something real. This is what you give me?" She sighed, exasperated, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Be grateful, at least I'm being honest now. Most women wouldn't even give you that courtesy. Be grateful." The phrase echoed in my mind, twisting my anger into something volcanic. My voice rose, trembling with fury and pain. "Grateful? For what? For you laughing at me behind my back? For the nights I sat up waiting while you were out with him? For being compared, belittled, treated like I was never enough?" My hands shook, but I didn't care who was watching anymore. "I gave you everything I had, every ounce of me, and you threw it away for someone with a bigger paycheck." She crossed her arms, her face hard, emotionless. "You make it sound like I'm the villain. I'm just being realistic. You live in a fantasy where love solves everything. But I want more than struggle. I want security, ambition, a future." She gestured to the man beside her. "He can offer that. You can't." The restaurant had gone silent, every eye fixed on us, but I couldn't stop. I poured out years of frustration, every slight, every wound she had left on my dignity. I told her how I ignored the jokes about my car, the way she flirted with others, the late-night secrets on her phone. I told her how I believed in her even when no one else did. And through it all, she just sat there, unmoved, staring at me like I was pathetic for still caring. Finally, my voice broke. "I don't even recognize you anymore. The woman I fell in love with is gone." She leaned back in her chair, cold and smug, and whispered, "Maybe she never existed. Maybe you just saw what you wanted to see." And in that moment, something inside me shattered. Not just my heart, but the illusion I had clung to all this time. But the worst part wasn't her betrayal, it was who she betrayed me with. When the dust settled after that disastrous night, the truth spread faster than I ever imagined. Because the man she had betrayed me with wasn't just some stranger. It was someone close enough to make the wound cut twice as deep. He was my supervisor at work, the man I had trusted to mentor me in my career. The betrayal wasn't only personal, it was professional. Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy who'd been cheated on, I was the guy who'd been humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. My friends were furious. One of them nearly slammed his fist on the table when I told him, "Your own boss? How could she do that to you? How could he do that to you?" Family members I hadn't spoken to in months were calling me, offering support, disbelief dripping from their voices. My mother's voice cracked when she said, "You gave her everything, and she still wanted more? My son deserves better." And then came the wider circle, the whispers, the stories, the online commentary. I imagined how Reddit would frame it. "Bro, she's a gold digger. You dodged a bullet. She was never yours. She was just leasing time until she found better. Red flag city. She told you straight up love doesn't matter. She was honest about being shallow. Those imaginary posts played in my head at night, almost comforting me when I couldn't sleep. Because believe me, there were plenty of sleepless nights. Nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every date, every kiss. Was it ever real, or was I just the stepping stone she stood on until someone richer came along? But as much as it broke me, I also felt a strange sense of validation. For the first time, people weren't telling me I was insecure or jealous. They were telling me I wasn't crazy. They saw her for what she truly was. Of course, she doubled down. When mutual friends confronted her, she didn't apologize. Instead, she threw it back on me. He wasn't ambitious enough. He was comfortable living small. I wanted more out of life. She framed herself as the practical one, the visionary, while I was the dead weight holding her down. Still, the louder she justified, the clearer it became. I wasn't the problem. I had been loyal, devoted, and true. She had been calculating, selfish, and cold. And in that storm of opinions, from whispers in my family to imagined Reddit threads screaming justice on my behalf, I finally realized I had a choice to make. The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life, but also the clearest one. I walked into her apartment with the engagement ring in my hand. She looked at me as if she still had leverage, like she thought I'd beg for her to change her mind. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply placed the ring on the counter and said, "You don't have to settle for me anymore. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." For the first time in weeks, I felt free. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just free. Walking away wasn't about punishing her. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself I had given away, piece by piece, to someone who never valued them. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into the things I had put aside. My career, my friends, my family. I started to laugh again, not because life was perfect, but because I finally understood the weight I'd been carrying. Her absence felt like an open wound at first, but slowly, it became a scar I could live with, a reminder that pain heals when you stop picking at it. And here's the truth I want anyone listening to hear. Love without respect is hollow. Loyalty without reciprocity is slavery. If someone treats you like you're disposable, it's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their blindness. Don't ever sacrifice your self-respect for the illusion of security. Yes, love may not pay the bills, but betrayal costs far more than money ever could.